We've talked about aging in our other programs, and in talking about that, we've discovered that the fastest growing population in the United States today is the age group over 70. That raises a lot of questions, namely the options. What do people do with their parents when they get old? And here to talk about it, and a person who is actually creating a documentary film on it, is Jim Vanden, who's the executive director of Terra Nova Films, an award-winning director, I may add, who's creating a documentary on the dynamics of caregiving for our parents. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you.
You have said, and I read a PR release on the program saying that the movie is not meant, the film, is not meant to be a factual, informative documentary on the options available. Rather, it is going to explore, quote, the real human psychological issues involved in counseling and making decisions. You have sat in some counseling sessions. You've been behind that mirror, the hidden mirror. What real human psychological issues have you noticed yourself?
Well, it seems like when people confront this issue and suddenly have to make a decision, and sometimes it doesn't happen suddenly, sometimes it is something that comes upon people more gradually, but at some point they have to make a decision how they're going to relate in a caregiving way with their parent, or are they going to let somebody else do the caregiving for the parent. And oftentimes when people are in a situation where they are the ones who are having to take care of their parent, or maybe the daughter-in-law is having to take care of a father-in-law, a lot of problems, just relational problems, can come out in that kind of a thing because different personalities are involved. Sure. There's a lot of changes happening to the older person. The older person may be depressed because of what's happening. And if there's not a close bond between those people, an emotional bond in the first place, sometimes it can become a really big burden.
I imagine one issue in trying to maintain the close ties, and maybe they have to make the decision to send them to a nursing home where they need medical attention. How do they enforce those close ties at the same time, telling them, hey, we have to separate? I imagine that has come out.
Yeah, and people, I've heard it again and again from all groups of people, the terrific amount of guilt involved. Because I think especially people of the generation that are now dealing with caring for aging parents, people 20 years older than myself probably, have been brought up to think that it's a dishonorable thing to do to let somebody else take care of your parent. That's your job. And yet at the same time, society is putting a lot of people in roles where they're caught with working, for example, women especially going back to work. And also that age of people are dealing with teenagers. So in a sense, that group of people get squeezed between. And they feel like somehow they should be handling all of this, and it's just not possible for them to do. And if they have to make a decision about putting a parent in a nursing home, even though it may be, the right thing for them to do, they still feel a lot of guilt about it. And part of it is because there may be a close bond there and they want to try to continue that. But sometimes people find that when they attempt to do that, there's too much closeness there and it kind of backfires.
What do you want to achieve in this film? Is it that you want to tell these people who are going through these frustrations that, hey, you're not alone, that it's okay? Yeah,
definitely. I think that's the first thing that I see the film doing. Just by the fact that up there on the screen are other people who are going through the same thing that these people who will be watching the film are, sort of gives these people permission to feel the way they're feeling. This struck me, somebody told me about this, I'd never thought about it that way, but it's kind of an issue which people don't really feel comfortable even owning, that they have problems about it or that they have conflicts or bad feelings. And I think the first thing that these people, the first thing that will be helpful for these people is to realize that they're not alone and that their feelings are not at all abnormal.
Now you've tried to seek out willing participants to be in your film, and you think, a lot of people would want to be on. What have you gone through? How willing are people to be in your film?
Well, first of all, I guess I was thinking that there would be more what are called self-help groups, where people who are dealing with this kind of issue get together and kind of reinforce or support each other as they're going through it. But I'm finding that there's not as many of those as I had thought. and I've been looking for a couple of months now, and have uncovered some, but not as many as I had thought. And because of the personal nature of this kind of an issue, people, even if they're in these kinds of groups, especially if the groups are new and they're new to this, are not too willing to let an outsider come in and kind of look, and especially if we would want to film something like that. So I am facing, you know, how to handle that right now, and I'm still hoping that I will find some people after I talk to them for a while that I might get them to go.
But conversely, you said you talked to someone who talked to you for about an hour and afterwards said, gee, I feel better. In fact, you were asking me, I was going through a similar situation with my grandmother. I imagine in opening up, for some people this may be the first time they're opening up about the frustrations they're experiencing, you know, on film.
Yeah, I don't know if that would be the case. I think that before they would agree to go on film, they would have thought about these things a lot. They may have talked about them a lot. And there are a lot of programs with hospitals, for example, where there's a social worker who will help the family or the individual deal with this whole change and how to handle the caregiving.
Hey, where ultimately is this film going to end up? Right now, we may want to add, Jim would like people who, if you are experiencing this and you have to make a decision about where to place your parents or how to take care of them, Jim is willing to talk to you about it. At the end, we'll give the phone number. But where is this ultimately going to end up?
I mean, what will be the end product, or how will it be used? We're looking at a 27, 28-minute documentary, which we can distribute throughout the country as a film which groups can use, which agencies can use, just, again, to introduce people to the idea that this is not, that they're not alone in this, and to give them some vehicle, some tool to give some feedback to. If, after it's finished, some television stations are interested in picking it up, that would also be good.
Okay, you mentioned one thing. You said the guilt. A lot of children feel guilty about sending away, what seems to be sending away their parents. Do you actually talk to the parents too, the elderly?
Yes, if they are in a position, you know, that they can converse, certainly.
In doing your research, you've talked to several families right now, and right now you're going through the screening process. And you say you really haven't found what you were hoping to find. What have you found, and what have you hoped to find?
I have found people who, you know, are wrestling with it, but I guess I have, maybe I'm wanting to see too much before I start filming, but I have not found any people who are willing to go on camera and to say, yes, we'll talk about this, or to let themselves be observed as they're working through some of these issues.
Do you understand it? Do you understand why?
I think I understand part of it. Yeah.
Would you be willing?
I think I would.
Okay, you have done many films, and award-winning films, and one in particular which we're going to show the people right now shows an honest testimonial of a family talking about caring for an elderly couple, and the children are involved, and how you work with them in creating a documentary film. This is a 5-minute piece out of a program, out of a film you made because somebody cares. And I must add, it was winner of Best in Show Award at the National Mental Health Association 1981 Film Festival, and also was selected to be screened at the White House Conference on Aging, Gerontological Society Conference, and the American Film Festival of 1982. We'll take a look at that right now.
I'm not hurting you, am I?
No, but I've been asking if the walks were dry.
Well, out in front it's real clear, but on the street it's icy, but we'll be careful.
Well,
We got a call from church and they asked me if I would shop for this elderly couple. When I first got the call, I was a little reluctant. I thought, oh, what am I getting myself involved in? You know, going to shop for these people every week, and, you know, do I want to do all this, and will I be busy? That was the first thing that comes to your mind is kind of, I don't think I'll do it. So I thought, well, you know, they need help, I'll go. I went in and there was this little couple, they were 78 years old, married 55 years, and he's very independent, but he couldn't get out. He had a bad cold, so I went shopping for him. And it just started. I would go, you know, go back once a week, then it was just call them up to see how they were feeling, and it was visit him once a week besides going shopping for him. Then when the snow went away, he decided he could go shopping by himself, and we just kept visiting. And we have all got involved. We've had them here for Thanksgiving dinner. And our whole family is here, and it's not just, you know, one person getting involved. I think everybody, and it kind of grows on you. It's something you really don't realize it's happening.
And the whole family liked Mr. and Mrs. Brown, and Tammy carried him up the stairs and everything.
There.
Okay?
Fine.
Not squeeze
You look like an
anything.
Eskimo. She's on the second floor, and we thought maybe we could make her down, you know, get her down the stairs, you know, with the wheelchair. And then I thought, no, I don't think that I'm strong enough to handle something like that. And her husband certainly wasn't healthy enough to do that. And so then we kind of talked Tom into...
She's always worried about her breaking my back with her weight and everything, and she couldn't weigh much more than 80 pounds. And like a regular grandmother, she'd always try and sneak you like a $5 bill or something when Mom wasn't looking, you know. And considering the income that they're on, it isn't too easy to be able to have a little extra.
Yeah, it's a pretty nice place to sit.
Right here? Good enough.
Whoa. Where's Daddy? Oh, look at Daddy. Oh, so here we are.
Yeah, all set.
Thank you, Tommy.
Didn't hurt you, did I?
You never heard
No?
me.
Gotta get that.
Sit down.
Hi, Susie.
Hi.
Sweetheart.
It was a long time.
Thanksgiving.
That's right. It
Yes,
was Thanksgiving.
That's right, that's right.
When we had first gotten the call to go, I had just lost my mother about a year before that, and I had lived with her all my life, so I was really attached to her. And just 6 months prior to that, Sal had lost his mother, and she had died of cancer and stayed with us for about 2.5 months before she passed away.
About 3 years.
So it was like, it really hit us, because all of a sudden we had, I mean, my mother was ill for a long time, so we had a lot of sickness and illness, and then 2 deaths within 6 months. So when we first got the call and I went shopping, and when I came back, I says to him, oh, Dad, this couple is really great, you know. And he says to me...
Don't get involved.
Right. Back off, he
Back
says.
off.
You know, he says, you're going to be hurt, and it's going to, you know, you're going to feel it, and we have had enough. And I said, you know, I think you're right. And, you know, I was really kind of scared. I thought, you know, when people get older, I think the first thing you think of is, you know, sooner or later, they're going to go. And it's not an easy thing to get attached to somebody, and then all of a sudden, I thought, you know, any one of us could go. It's not, you know, death isn't just for someone who's 80 or 90. It can happen to someone 10, 11, 15, you know.
My wife, whatever job she does, for anything, including taking care of people, she puts her heart and soul into it. And I watched her with her mother and with my mother, and it really hurt her when she lost her mother, and I just didn't want to see her hurt anymore. That's the only reason. I didn't want to get involved. You know, these were old people. God forbid something happened and she got involved, and there we go again. And I just couldn't take it, okay? But it's turned out differently in this respect, that she's done so much for herself. I mean, she's done a lot for these Mr. and Mrs. Braun, a heck of a lot. But she's gotten a lot out of it, including myself. Right now, I'm not thinking what's going to happen in the future. You might as well enjoy what you have today. And that's the only way I see it right now. And it's done a lot for her, for the whole family.
That was an impressive piece of footage we
Thank
just
you.
saw. You have made several films like this. One was called Take a Stand, about fear of elderly going to court. There was Because Somebody Cares, and now one on aging parents. What is your interest in social service films? I mean, these are not lucrative films. It's not like making a Gandhi, you know.
I think my interest in film lies more in the topics that I deal with than in the film as a medium itself, although I enjoy working very much with film as a medium. But having had some seminary background and just kind of a gut level concern for the, I don't know, not oppressed, but the people who are less advantaged in our society, dealing with issues that they're dealing with and trying to bring other people's empathy to that.
Is there an audience out there?
Yes, there is, but it's an audience which it's not a mass audience, and films like these are not used that way. They're used more selectively where there's already some stirring of consciousness and some people interested in a particular issue, and they hear about the film and get the film and use it as a tool to do more of that with more people.
Imagine one of the agencies, one you are working with, is Council for Jewish Elderly, which happens to be a beneficiary agency of the Jewish Federation of Chicago. You're working with them as well as other agencies. How are they helping you with this project?
CJE has been really great in putting me in touch with a lot of people who are going through things like this, showing me the kinds of innovative programs that they are trying to work with to answer some of these questions. I've looked at some of their group living homes, talked about their shared home arrangements, and looked at their nursing home facility. And they also, I should mention, do have a group going of self-help.
Self-help, including the children and parents?
I think it's just the children that are wrestling with how to do the caregiving.
Well, I've also seen those group living residence halls or homes, and they're very impressive, and I imagine that would weaken or decrease that feeling of guilt sending them to a place like that. Have you found that?
Yeah, definitely, although you have to make the distinction that people who are going there are still fairly much able to be on their own, and what they are really looking for is some companionship, along with some kind of independence. That kind of combination allows, the group home allows that kind of living. But yeah, for parents who are concerned about their, for children who are concerned about their parents being lonely, this is one option. Or if their parent can't be entirely on their own, it's nice to have somebody else around.
Now, you say you've worked with social workers, and the social workers have worked with the children of an elderly parent. Is it easier sometimes for the social worker to make these decisions? And we'll get into what some of the options are. Is it easier for that social worker or the nurse or the doctor to help make a decision because they're one step removed?
It may be easier, but I don't think it's best that the social worker make the decision. I am quite sure from the social workers I have talked to that they would say that themselves. What they are there for is to facilitate the decision-making process on the part of the children or the spouse who is having to decide about caregiving, because ultimately no two people are alike and no two situations are alike, so you can't prescribe a certain set answer. I think people, as some woman so nicely said, they have to customize their own caregiving package, for themselves, what works for them and for their parents best. I think really what's at issue here is basic human freedom when it comes to human relationships. How do both, the caregivers or the children, or if that's an older spouse, and the person who needs the caregiving, how is most of their freedom, on both sides preserved?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that happens to be a theme that you want to carry throughout the film, is that sense of human freedom. How do children encourage that sense of human freedom when they say, hey, Dad, you're going to the da-da-da center for geriatrics? A piece of their freedom is almost taken away because they're taken out of their apartment. Have you seen that dynamic in your...
Yeah, and I think in answer to that, it's very important for the older person who's in need of the care, if he's or she is still capable, to have a say in the decision-making. Now, there will come a time, and I've observed this, where what that person wants and what the caregiver may want are diametrically opposed. And then that's, a case where you probably have to bring in a third party and just mediate some kind of solution, which may not be what everybody wants, but it's closest to what everybody wants.
Jim, if you were to make this film 10 years ago, how would it be different as opposed to making it today? In other words, how are the options different today?
Okay. I think right now there's a lot of consideration being given to options other than people taking care of their parent or their spouse at home full-time, or, on the other hand, putting them in a nursing home. In other words, there are ranges in between there that may fit or suit a person's needs. I think one of the things that's happened in our society is that nursing homes, because they've been so readily available, have been an easy place for people to go to, probably too quickly, before they really had to go to. And one of the things that's being given a lot of consideration now is how to improve home health care And there's a lot of agencies which are giving attention to this, providing services which would help somebody who is either taking care of him or herself at home, but needs a little outside support, or may help a caregiver who is caring for an aging
Now,
parent
does
at home.
hospice enter into any of this?
It may. That's one thing I have not thoroughly enough explored. My understanding of hospice is that it's more for a short-term illness, and what we're talking about often here is a more long-term, not illness, but disability on the part of an older person. Another thing that's becoming more available is something called daycare services, which allows a family who is choosing to have an older person, an older parent or spouse, live in the house with them, but needs either a break from that or, because they're going to work, needs some place for this person to be taken care of. But it's a little more than that even. It's not just a drop-in center. It's a place where the family can take the older person and be assured that they will be cared for and that they will have some companionship during the day and some activities during the day rather than just sitting home alone by themselves.
Now, do any of these places have family involvement? You know, a day when the family comes and interacts with them and their other fellow residents?
It depends on the daycare center, but I do know that there are some innovative things that are being done. I know, for example, of one where they have an auction where the older people themselves participate in the auction.
That's great. Got the caller up there, yeah. I imagine there are a lot of ways, and we had discussed this before, a lot of ways you can go with this film. You can talk about options, you can talk about hospice, and you can make it into this grandiose production to the extent where it could be like another Gandhi. Are you going to go into backgrounds, how different backgrounds influence how people take care of the elderly? For instance, the Eskimos, we think of the elderly going on a piece of ice. I don't know how the Asian people, if they would differ from the Greek people who would take care of the elderly versus Jewish people. Are you going to explore that at all?
I don't think that the film will lend itself to that. I mean, there won't be enough time to do that, plus focus on, the reality of the feelings that people are going through and experiencing and what choices are available for them to choose.
Have you explored that at all on your own?
No, I haven't. No. It is an interesting topic, though.
Also, in light of government setbacks, we've read a lot about that, financial setbacks, the elimination of a lot of special social service programs. Has this eliminated the options, or has it just made us a little bit more creative in what to do? Are more people forced to have their parents stay with them because of those setbacks?
Yeah, I think your insight about we're becoming a little more creative in what to do. I think that's happening. There are some hardships because of government cutbacks, but where there's a need, people will usually come through and find some way of meeting that need. And I think what's happening is that I've used the word self-help group, and that's a fairly popular thing these days, but it is a very good concept where people who have different things to offer each other pool those resources and those energies and those talents, and so they begin to help each other, and in doing that often help themselves as well.
Now, if a family wanted to talk to you and said, this sounds like a good idea, I think what we're going through is really unique, or I think what we're going through is typical, what are you looking for if they are interested in talking to you?
A family either who, over a period of time, because of the declining health of a parent or a spouse, is coming to realize that something is going to have to be done other than the status quo. How we've been handling it isn't going to work very much longer. And sometimes people are reluctant to face up to that, and then something happens to tip the scales and they have to. Or a situation where, because of a stroke, for example, somebody is suddenly thrown into a very almost traumatic kind of situation where their parent was one way one day and the next day is another way and needs a lot of care. And they are in the hospital, but then they face this long, arduous recuperation period, recovery period, which may take a lot of care and a lot of energy. That can be and patience, and that can be very traumatic for people, and that's a much more sudden kind of process that they have to work through. But I would, if possible, like to get both of those in the film, because both of those are very real issues that people face.
And before we announce who they can, how they can contact you, what other projects are you working on? You've dealt with the elderly going to court, you've dealt with people helping the elderly, not the parents. Now you're dealing with the elderly and their children. What else do you want to explore? What else is left on tap there that Vanden Bosch is going to film?
Well, I could go into a lot of things, but probably the more immediate thing for me would be to I've also been interested in the relationship of community people or volunteers in the community to mentally impaired persons. And we are currently trying to raise money to do a film which would explore that whole
Is much headway being made in that direction? Every once in a while, it has peaks and valleys.
Yeah, I know of no film which really looks at this very closely. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not happening, but I've talked to several people who have said, you know, when this does happen, a lot of good things come from it, and I think it needs to be encouraged. You know.
Do you ultimately, I mentioned the government before with their setbacks, but ultimately, do you want something to be done as a result of your films? For instance, your film was shown at the White House Conference on Aging. Do you want some action to be taken after seeing your film, not only from children who are going to see this kind of film, but the government itself?
Yeah, but I think it's a more indirect kind of thing. I think the way this film might influence policy is not directly. In other words, it's not going to talk about government policy as it relates to this. It may mention it, but it's not going to focus on that. But as more and more people begin to look at the options that are available, or what should be available to them, they will begin to press for these options to come into place. And if that means through legislation, then that's how that will happen, as more and more people are free enough to say, hey, we need this.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, hopefully films such as your film on aging parents will help. If people do want to talk to you about it, who can they call? How can they get a hold of you? What is the phone number?
Okay. They can call me at 944-1102.
1102, and that's Jim Vanden Bosch.
Right.
I hope you get a lot of response and lots of luck. And I know from seeing your other films, you've helped my insight in caring for the elderly. I'd like to thank Jim Vanden Bosch from Terra Nova Films for being with us today. And for Focus, I'm Deborah Palmer.
Sim Shalom Tova Uvracha Chen Vachesed Verachamim Sim Shalom